Hey, y'all. Welcome to Simple Conversations. This is KJ.
Hey, and it's Alice. So pause us for a minute, grab you something to drink, come back, sit down, and be a part of this conversation.
Because we have a lot to say. Welcome to Simple Conversations.
So, hey, listeners, are you ready to join us? We're already in mid-conversation because we had so much to say about this topic. So join us today as we may finalize this conversation, but who knows? There could be more to be said. You may have comments and things that you'd like to share with us, your stories. Feel free to do that on our Patreon page. You can also do it through any of our social media feeds, and definitely in the comments of this podcast. Always like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Have a great day and thanks for listening.
So I have a client who willingly shared with me that she's atheist. And so she asked me a question one day, and she said, because she knows I'm a believer. I mean, you come in my salon, it's very evident that I'm a believer. Right. By the music I listen to versus to, some of the things that are on the wall. I mean, we don't always have church in there, but right. We do sometimes. But anyhow, with all of that being said, she asked me if I thought that, because, of course, the Bible was written by man. Okay. She said, have you ever thought about it was a book that was written to control man? And I said, no, I haven't at all, because I believe in it. But I also, for me, I hear from God. I have a spirit of discernment. I will no longer be controlled by religious beliefs. So then I proceeded to ask her, have you ever read any of the Bible? And so she knows a lot about the history of it and the stories, more so about the Old Testament. And so, I just really shared, the two greatest commandments of the New Testament, and told her that that's what I live by. And so, that was something that she could get behind. You know what I mean? Not really sure about, love God with all of your heart, but definitely love your neighbor. And that's, some of the questions with the topics that we've just been talking about in the hair salon is very interesting. Some people's views about, because I told her, I said, I absolutely believe that there are churches all over this world, not just the United States, where absolutely people are being manipulated and controlled. But I think that's taken the Bible out of context.
I think so too.
Yeah. So
definitely taking Jesus out of context.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So
if we could just take Jesus more literally than we do the Bible as a whole. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Because not none of us, there are people that are scholars. But I mean, if you don't speak the original language and you don't understand the historical context of who it was written to, why was it written, what was happening in its full entirety, we'll never get the full picture of what it's really saying.
Yeah.
But we can take away who Jesus was as a person and what he did.
Yeah.
And how he treated people.
Yeah.
We don't need to understand a different language for that.
That's right.
That's pretty clear. Now, it's important, like understanding the language is important, for example. So when Jesus was with the woman who was caught in the act of adultery, the passage that most of us read, he says to her, neither do these men condemn you, because, nobody ended up throwing a rock, because he said to them, you without sin cast the first stone. And then the oldest men to the youngest men began to drop their rocks and walk away. And he said, what do you see? And she's like, no one is here to condemn me. And he says, okay, go and sin no more. It doesn't say that. The actual original language says, go and be in no shame, or go without shame, which is a completely different thing than go and sin no more.
Ah,
Right?
yeah.
Because in all reality, we're human. She would never go and sin no more. Right? That's not going to happen. But he told her, go and be without shame for being caught in the act of adultery. Because again, we didn't catch the man she was with.
Right.
Okay. Only the woman is who was drug out. Yeah, yeah. Women are not represented fairly in the Bible. The New Testament does do a better job than the Old Testament. That's true. But I think that's why we have to look at how Jesus actually interacted with people and how he talked with people and how he loved people
Yes.
and he didn't shy away from women or women from other cultures or people from other cultures and he gave us stories and examples that were all about loving and treating people with respect and with equality and with compassion.
Yeah.
And he used examples all the time of different people groups that did not like each other and did not get along.
That's right.
And so when you talk about like the Good Samaritan story where you had three people of religious superiority pass this guy on the side of the road and just leave him there, and then you have the person who should have hated him, they should have been enemies, who's the one who helped him, ate all of his stuff and said, if it's more than that, when I come back through, I'll make it up, right? Okay, that could be black and white people. That could be really white people with any other culture, because white people seem to have a problem with everybody that ain't white on some level. Okay, that could be straight people and gay people, or straight people and transgender people. It could be any type of, it could be Democrats and Republicans today, like, because they're so at odds with each other. It can be any type of people groups that are supposed to not like each other. But he set an example for us to say, stop doing that and look at your neighbor with the same humanity that you have and stop trying to put them in a box.
Yeah.
Just see them the way I see them, that I love them enough that I gave my life for them, just like I did you.
Right. Right.
So why do
Yeah.
we
He
always
didn't
try
just
to
die on the
elevate
cross for
ourselves?
me. He died on the cross for yeah.
For everybody.
Everybody. Everybody.
I don't know why we feel so much better about ourselves when we elevate ourselves above some other group of people, whoever they are. Stay at home mom versus working mom, divorced versus not divorced, or middle class versus poor, or upper class, or, oh my gosh, can we just.
Or listen, let's just go right on and say it. Baptist and Catholics, or
Sure. Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
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 Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Non-denominational and Church of God and Kojic and all the others. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
I really have a problem when leaders of churches use their pulpit as a place to influence others to believe the way they believe. For not for biblical matters, okay? But I'm talking about with the way people vote, whether or not people get the COVID vaccine, whether or not people even believe that COVID exists.
Mm-hmm. Let's go ahead and call him what it is. Greg Locke out of Tennessee. He's one of them who's made national news.
Yeah.
And I'll link the article of him, one of the articles of him in our show notes as well, who has preached with great enthusiasm and charisma from his pulpit.
Yes.
And
Great.
spewed all type of hatred for the current administration, and has said that the COVID is not a virus. It's not a real thing.
It's a hoax.
He even had a member of his congregation die from COVID, because the person, they say, would not get the vaccine because he preached against it so much that nobody could get the vaccine in that church and tell anybody, because they would be probably, I would guess they'd be ousted. And it split a family, and probably more than that. We only know, what the news portrayed, but I think that's a blatant abuse of your position.
It is.
It's spiritual abuse, because you're using
Yes.
your position and your authority as their so-called, air quotes, spiritual leader to govern them and tell them all kinds of falsehoods.
It's emotional abuse.
It is.
Can you
It's
imagine? Can you
manipulative.
imagine the strife that family that lost a family member due to COVID, that died of COVID, and now half of them are still at that church. And I don't know if it's half. Some of them are still at that church. Some of them have left the church because this is what he's spewing in the pulpit, yet their family member has died. We have to think logically now.
Reconcile that as just even not even the family member, but just as a congregation person, like just as like how do you reconcile that in your head? It's not real, but he died of it. Do we think that like the medical people lied to us?
Yes, those are stories that I've absolutely heard.
Wow.
Yes, that they have died, and that they have lied about the cause of death because medical facilities are getting thousands of dollars
I've heard
for
that too.
every patient that they're taking care of that's been diagnosed with COVID. Yeah, but to me, the gist of this is, if your church is splitting your family and is causing strife in your family, like that's a problem.
Well, and let's back up, because again, if we're doing life together, then we're all family. So anytime you're spewing this nasty, vile hatred of stuff, whatever it is, and we've seen a lot of it over the course of the last 2 years, a lot of it politically and racially. And then we've had very loud silence as well. I say, when you talk about splitting a family, when people leave because of such differences, aren't they being split from their family too? Even if they're not biological?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the last 2 places that we left, we definitely felt like we lost family.
Yeah.
We definitely grieved those relationships for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't tell everybody your truth about why you're really leaving. You don't know what people think of you for leaving. You don't know what's being said about you because you left. Like after we left the second place, somebody messaged me, sent me a text and said, "Hey, did you guys move?" And I was like, "No, we didn't move." Because the people that were in leadership never told anybody why we left. We made it very clear to them why we left. And we didn't feel like it was our place to tell the congregation why we were leaving, because that causes dissension, and we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to cause any kind of dissension or make people feel one kind of way or the other, or cause loyalty issues or whatever. So we just quietly walked away. But dang, we were pretty busy people there, and you can't just ignore the fact that we're no longer there. Like, you have to tell people. Yeah, we grieved those relationships for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I guess I have never been so involved in a church where I called people at church my family.
Yeah, we were. We
And
have a
so,
70-year history with one of them.
I mean, I loved them,
Yeah.
and they were my friends, and I look forward to seeing them, and some of them I've maintained relationships with.
And we have too with some. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's very interesting. Yeah, I never have considered people that I went to church with my family.
That's
But
something.
I also keep, I don't, when you say do life together, like I don't do life with many people.
That's something to dig deeper into.
I just don't do life with many people. Yeah. So I'm very, yeah, cautious about who I do life with. Yeah. So if you do life with me, you should call yourself blessed.
I'm blessed. I am blessed. I do life with you. I think I do life with you.
Yes. 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 Yeah. So
Maybe I just
another
insert
story.
myself in your life. That's what I do.
Yeah. So, hey, get in where you fit in.
Right?
Um, so that leads me to another story of where I had someone share with me that they wanted to go to a women's Bible study group. And so they were really enjoying the women's Bible study group, and the women were so encouraging and were so positive, and she enjoyed the fellowship of that. And so they invited her to church. And so her very first time going to church, the pastor told them who they should vote for.
Uh,
And so, uh-huh, uh-huh, and that he could not stand before the congregation and not educate them and let them know about the things that he had learned. And so he just thought that it was in his best interest, as a shepherd, to share who they should vote for. And the interesting thing about it is that she considered herself to be affiliated with the same um, party, but that turned her off.
well, good.
Like, right. And that's exactly what I said, because that's kind of scary for me. If you go to a church and the pastor is going to tell you like who you're going to vote for, and you're probably going to vote for that person anyway, but you see through all of that.
Well, why don't you just go ahead and tell me where you think I ought to do my grocery shopping and what kind of vehicle I ought to buy and, what kind of clothes I ought to wear and what restaurants I should um, patron and which ones I should not. And, just go ahead and tell me all those other things too, because I obviously am not intelligent enough to make those decisions for myself.
Right.
Or, I can't pray and hear from God, because why would I be able to do that as just, regular old
Why
faith?
would I have an opinion? Why would I have issues that are near and
Yeah.
dear to my heart where I could make a logical
Mhm.
executive decision about who I choose to vote for? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Very, very, very interesting.
Mhm.
Very.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jen Hatmaker. Let me tell you about her. So Jen Hatmaker actually, I think, did not leave the Southern Baptist Convention. I think she got kicked out. So I'm reading this article from Religion News Service, and this article is dated April of 2020. And the headline is Jen Hatmaker on her new book, The Pandemic and Why She Has No Regrets. She tells us all about it in the last book that she wrote, Fierce, Free, and Full of Fire. She tells us that, and I did a study on that during 2020 when that book came out. She said, I got to the point where I said to myself, Jen, you either get to hang on to your career as you know it, or you get to hang on to your integrity, but you can't have both. So she was talking about being part of the organization and when her values did not align with them any longer. She was being located inside a system that was still very much operating under the rules of patriarchy and misogyny. Nobody would want to admit this, but white supremacy and privilege, power differentials, where it was very clear who was right and wrong, who was in and who was out, who was included and who was excluded. So that's what she said to herself. The reward is you get to be a part of the group, you get to belong. That was it. And they said, was there loss? She said, yes. I hope I didn't gloss over that in the book. I hope I told the truth about it because the cost was high. It was incredibly punitive. it was just loss upon loss upon loss for a while, and I didn't know how I'd ever get to the bottom of it. I didn't ever know if it would end. Her book was pulled off print, her contract was canceled, and it was pulled off the shelves. And she had been excommunicated overnight from a community that she had served for, I would say, probably close to 20 years.
Wow.
She said, honestly, everything after that has been rebuilt in such a beautiful way. My community, my work, everything. And all of that happened because she wrote, in 2014, she wrote a blog confronting another evangelical author who had claimed that World Vision allowing LGBTQ employees signaled the collapse of Christianity, and yet they weren't concerned about the male author's words. She said, do you think there's a double standard for what men and women are allowed to say within evangelicalism, or who's allowed to be controversial? And she said, oh my gosh, of course there is. Men are in charge, specifically white men. It's such a constant state of gaslighting that you don't even know that you have permission to challenge the system, that it's still keeping you disenfranchised. So she went through the same things that Beth Moore did, except Beth Moore was on the offensive and quit. Jen Hatmaker was canceled. Yeah.
Why? Because she was exposing something against the church.
Right. And because she was affirming to the LGBTQ community and they couldn't handle it, that she would be part of their convention and
because they're
affirming at the same
judgmental.
time. Yeah. I'll link her book to it, but she tells a great story in the beginning of her book, and she talks about the first time that she got asked to speak at a large church. She called it Big Church because she had always done women's conferences, right? And been a speaker for women's events, but she had never spoken on a Sunday. Here we go, Sunday. And this church was doing like a week-long thing, and they asked her to come and be one of their speakers or some kind of revival-y, whatever thing, and asked her to come and be one of her speakers. And she said, I spent a lot of money on my outfit because that mattered. I spent hours and hours. I had everything, Old Testament, New Testament. I had all the stories. I had everything in this message perfectly done. She paid for herself to get there, and they gave her $500 for coming. And she found out that the guy who came to speak after her was paid like some ridiculous amount of like $5,000 or something crazy. And when the man introduced her, actually, he said, now men, have a seat, because what you're about to hear, the gist of it was, it's for your wives. And
in other words, y'all can take a nap now because
she's not going to have anything to say to you because she's a woman. And she said she felt so small when she went up on the platform that she was like, it really threw her for a loop on how to then present her message, and to find out that not only she paid her way to get there, and he gave her like, seriously, it was like $500, and the guy who came in to speak after her got like $5,000. And of course, he was allowed to talk to everybody. Women could listen to him. Imagine that. They let us stay in the room. Yeah. Isn't it nice of them to let us stay in the room and be a part of the conversation?
So now, if you were in a corporate world, because I mean, like, I have family members that have been in a corporate world where men make 10,000, 10 times the amount that the woman does. I mean, yeah. I mean, I have a close family member who I know this for sure. I mean, like, what would that be called in a corporate world?
It's still misogyny.
Right.
Well, and you know what? Those men that are making way more money, they're never the ones asked to bring the birthday cake for the co-worker either. It's always the woman who's asked to pick up the birthday cake or the cupcakes, or to clean the coffee pot, or to, restock the paper towels in the kitchen of the workplace. Like, I'm just saying.
So true.
Mm-hmm.
So true.
It is.
Wow.
Look, if you're not looking for it, it's so ingrained in us that it's okay, and we don't see it until you know. So that whole woke, we're now woke. Like, I don't even know what that really means. Like, I'm gonna have to look it up on
But
Earth.
we're woke.
But I am woke, okay? I am aware when I go into a restaurant, if there are people of color there or if it's all white people. I'm aware when I go into the nail salon that all the pictures on the wall are white feet and white hands, even when white people are not the ones who own the salon. I am aware when we go, there's a local restaurant here that has superheroes up, like all over their this little foyer space going to the bathrooms, and they're all men superheroes, even though there are some pretty amazing women superheroes. Okay. So people, we have to start taking notice of what's missing. Who is missing from the table? Are women missing from the table? Are people of color missing from the table? Are people of other genders missing from the table? Because we live in a diverse world, and it should be the diverse world making decisions
That's right.
together, collectively,
That's right.
collaborating together.
Yeah.
No one should be left out of the process because
Right.
the decisions that we make affect everybody.
Everybody. Yeah. And the church should look like the world.
If the people making the decisions are not the people who are affected by the decisions, then they should not be the people making the decisions.
Decisions. That's right. That's right.
If the decisions don't affect you, then you need to be more inclusive.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I want to add one more article that I read.
Okay.
So this is Bishop Jakes. Now, I have loved Bishop Jakes, T.D. Jakes, for years. I have been to his Woman Thou Art Loosed conference twice, way back in the day, probably in like, before that, let me think. Maybe like, I don't know, 99, 2000, probably before that. I don't know. I've been twice in Atlanta. It's in the Superdome. It was amazing. Probably 10,000 plus women there. It was crazy. I loved it. I've always been a follower of him, his books, his sermons. Yeah. So he did an interview. I'm not gonna. I'll scroll to the top in a minute and tell you when it was, because I'm at a part here that I don't want to lose. But he's being interviewed. The person's name is Green. I don't know, and I'll tell you in a minute. And he says to him, Jake says, I think it's true in some cases, and I think he's talking about here. About the coronavirus and about us helping people, like what we learned over the last year of quarantine. And he said, I've met pastors who cared and have joined hands and tried to help and serve, and who were first responders in times of crisis. But by and large, it makes people uncomfortable to look at complicated problems. And the problems in underserved communities are complicated by poor education, poor access to medical care, crime, and the distance in culture. As a whole, I think white evangelicals lost sight of, and this is in quotes, what would Jesus do? Because they only define Jesus in very narrow terms. And the person doing the interview said, okay, well, you're going to have to say a little bit more about that. And Jakes says, I think that social issues define the spaces where faith and politics and society intertwine. Roe versus Wade and same gendered loving people, and he has in brackets, white evangelicals don't always put the same level of weight on the poor, the disenfranchised, or criminal justice problems. They don't see that as important. The person doing the interview said, just to be clear, I take it that theologically speaking, you might not disagree with, say, a conservative Southern Baptist pastor on abortion or same-sex marriage, but you're saying that there's a difference in emphasis. He said, yes, there's a great deal of emphasis. You're exactly right. There's a great deal of difference in emphasis. To raise the concern for the unborn above the born, to fight for the life in the womb and not in the prison or in the school systems, If life is valuable, then after the mother pushes out the baby, that life should still be valuable.
Yes, ma'am.
The interview is really good. And again, I'll link this in. He also talks about his relationship with Paula White, and who had been a long time speaker at his conferences, her relationship with with the previous administration, their different political views. It's really good. It's really good. Okay, so this was on newsbreak.com, and this interview was just done like 4 or 5 days ago.
Yeah, 7 days ago by Emma Green.
And it was posted in the Atlantic. So I'll link that one as well to our show notes. But he's always been a voice I respected. Last year,
Yes.
after the world blew up with racial tension again, he so not only did Elevation Church Stephen Furtick have Bishop Jakes there to talk about it again, which they had done already. They had done that after the Charlottesville attack as well. But he brought him in to talk about racial issues and the climate. Bishop Jakes also did a panel that I saw, and he had as guests all white pastors. It was Carl Lentz, Judah Smith, Stephen Furtick, Ron Carpenter. I feel like there was a fifth person. I feel like there was 5. That was very good. Judah Smith, he is of Church Home. It used to be called City Church Home in Seattle, Washington, West Coast. Great pastor. He cried like almost during the whole thing. Like he felt so wounded. And they talked about, why speaking up matters, why we're saying Black Lives Matters versus All Lives Matter, how belittling, and maybe belittling is not the right word, but demeaning it is to say all lives matter.
Yeah.
Um,
because all lives don't matter.
Well,
until Black Lives Matters.
Well, and because, other lives are not the ones in jeopardy now.
That's right.
Asian lives now with the whole coronavirus thing and the attack on our Asian communities.
That's right.
Yeah. So, gosh. But anyway, I've always respected his stand. And I think that we've watched him grow and evolve. I think the same with Stephen Furtick. Like, I have followed Furtick his entire career. I found him when I worked in youth ministry, and he did youth conferences still. And so I have followed him since I think like 2006. He has grown and evolved, and you've watched that evolution in his speaking, in his not just in how he's grown like as a pastor, but even how he's grown in compassion and in relating to, man, sometimes life sucks and sometimes life hurts. And being able to talk about that is so important. And
listen, not to interrupt you, but that was the first time, going back to speaking about Perry Noble, the first time I ever heard Perry Noble speak was in between his transition. Once he got
an elevation
sober, and then Stephen Furtick invited him back to preach, and he was sweating.
It was his first Sunday preaching after coming back from
it was, and I'll never forget it, because he said, I never thought that I would be doing this again, and the only reason why I'm here is because of Stephen Furtick. But I mean, hey, he's doing what God's called him to do. But so interesting. And one thing that I love about TD Jakes is that he said that the pastors, the leaders that have reached out to him to ask questions about racist experiences, what they need to know, how can they move forward, how can they be a voice for the church. Those are the people that he's really been pouring into, and making sure that he's communicating with, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, he says in this article too that he said that there were some pastors who tried to not be silent and tried to say things when this happened, didn't quite say things correctly, and then we're just going to like stop talking about it. And he reached out to them and said, you can't stop talking let's just change the conversation some. It's okay that you were trying to do the right thing. You didn't use the right verbiage. It's okay. Let's just keep talking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because I think that's
Extended
one
grace
thing
for
too.
that.
Absolutely. And I think that's one thing where I've had to grow talking about, being anti-racist, because I was so scared in the beginning about speaking out because I'm scared I'd get it wrong. But as long as I'm speaking with a voice from my heart, with Jesus in my heart, for love, for people, for humanity,
Yeah.
then I may get it wrong, but at least I'm not staying quiet anymore.
Right.
Because that's not good either. So
Right.
that's not good at all. So, and honestly, just like what my son says, things really aren't going to change until white people start speaking up.
That's right.
So yeah.
That's right.
So I have an obligation to speak up. So
I have a sticker on my car that says use your privilege for those who don't have it.
that's so good. That's so good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this has been really good.
Yeah.
Really good. Yeah. Really
Yeah, so
good.
listeners, I will include all of those articles that you can read for yourself in our show notes. And, we'd love to hear your stories. So if you guys have stories, we would love to hear your stories. So if it's too long to type out, message us and we will Zoom call you, or, you can record it and send it to us in a recording, or, whatever. But we would
Be
love
a
to hear
part of
your
our
stories.
conversation. Be a part of our
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
would love
Yeah.
that. So
And
again,
again, listeners, we're not telling you to leave your church. We're
sorry,
not telling you to leave your
disclaimer.
church. Yeah, and listen, just remember, we still love Jesus, and we read our Bible, and
We
we spend
just
time
care,
with the
okay?
Lord.
And it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be so controlling and complicated. You
Right.
know, the Old Testament, they followed not only the 10 commandments, but the Mosaic law. And there were like, I don't know, I feel like 513 or some ridiculous number of laws, because you had to have laws to follow the laws. And when Jesus came, he said, I didn't come to do away with the law, to abolish it. I came to fulfill it.
Yeah.
And he extended us grace, and grace is messy.
Yeah.
And it's easier to say, I check the box on rule number 1, 2, and 3, than it is to say, I'm not really sure what this looks like or what this feels like. But I'm going to walk with you through it, because that's what I really feel is the right thing to do. It's messy. Relationships are messy, but we're called to the messy. We're
Yeah.
called to that. We're called to, not everybody's situation fits in your box. Not every person fits in your box. We are all uniquely and divinely created. And so let's extend that grace to ourselves and to one another, and just love your neighbor
Yeah.
as you love the Lord. And
Yeah.
if you're having a hard time with that, then that's a place of evaluation. And I would say, as your life coach, you need to sit with that for a minute and do some journaling and some self-evaluation. And if you need to ask the questions of, why are you struggling in that area, and where's that coming from? What have
Yeah.
you believed that has led you to that place? And is that belief true?
Yeah.
That was your free
Yeah.
coaching moment for the day.
That's so good. And to take all my money. That was so good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really
I carry this so deep in my heart. Like, it troubles me so much when I think about all of the pain that is caused people in the name of God, and in the name of what should be for good, and the heartache. I've seen too much of it. I've been a part of too much of it.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
And for those people that go to church on Sunday, to check off that box, if they are sitting under leadership that is not healthy, helpful, or productive, and they're blaming God for what people have done that are representing God,
Yeah,
like that's that. I mean, it's time to call things out. It's time to expose it. If you love your church and you know that there's some shady stuff going on, like it's time to call it out, and it's time to expose it. Because until we do, like, okay, I had a conversation with someone who says you will never find a 100% healthy church because church is loaded with people. Okay. But I do believe that if we are all on the same accord and we all have one mission, that and we can let God be God, and stick to just being transparent and open, and everybody love God with all of your heart and love your neighbor, that I believe that the entity itself, I mean, will operate with tons of grace, a lot of mercy, and be healthier than some of the churches that we've chatted about.
Mm. I'd like to see what that looks like.
Again, there's some things that we've chatted about, that we've called out and exposed, with experiences and some stories that I just don't have the answers to. Like,
Yeah.
who would that fall on? And some of this, yeah, is just been making sure that we share these things. So if other people have experienced it, that they can say, "Oh my goodness, me too."
Right.
And some of it doesn't have answers, but I do believe that, until the church strives to do better and operate in grace, that our neighborhoods are, you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, our communities are, yeah. One thing I heard was, is if there's a church in your community and that community is sad and suffering, that's the church's fault. Like, if the church has greener grass than the two houses on each side of it, then, that's like that is a direct reflection of the church.
That's interesting.
It's
Mm-hmm.
very interesting, right? So we have a little church on our street, and when they cut their ditch bank, they also cut the two neighbors' ditch bank on both sides of them, because we have ditches in our neighborhood, and so I think, no, that's what that means. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, just something as simple as that. Something as simple as that. Stop complicating it.
Yeah.
Church doesn't need to be complicated. Jesus was not complicated.
Right. Although
Yeah.
the religious people probably thought he was.
Well, yeah, did he do most of his healings on the Sabbath, when,
He broke all the rules.
he broke all the rules?
Broke
Yeah.
all the rules.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
challenged their thinking and their mindsets and their approach and all of that. Yeah. Yeah.
So for you listeners who came here and you thought you were going to hear a bunch of scriptures and yeah,
I did talk about a few passages though.
you did.
I did.
You did. As a whole,
If you want
we
scriptures,
believe.
buy my book, and there's a weekly devotion. Has
Absolutely.
scriptures in
There
it,
you go.
and then there's a
And listen,
devotion.
as a whole, we still believe in the church. Okay, as a whole.
I'm
Maybe I should.
quiet on that. I'm gonna think on that. I believe that the body is supposed to be the church.
Yeah.
I don't really know at this point what I think about the organized church and how it functions. I don't know what I think about it.
Yeah.
I think it's gotten so far away from its origins that I don't know that it's recognizable according to where it started.
Okay, listeners, be a part of the conversation. Let
Yeah,
us know.
join us.
Yeah.
Ask your questions. Tell us where you struggle, because then we won't feel alone.
I know, right?
All right, you guys have a wonderful day. Have the best day available to you. And as always, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, y'all.
Hey, you guys, we just want to say thank you today. We want to thank our listeners and those of you that have subscribed to the Simple Conversations podcast. Friends, thanks.
Hey y'all, this is KJ from Simple Conversations Where Grace Meets Strength. Thank y'all so much for listening and tuning in. If it weren't for y'all, there would be no reason for us to do this. Listen, we need your help. We need your support. So head on over to patreon.com/Simple Conversations and decide exactly how you want to be involved. For $5 a month, you would get access to behind the scenes content. For $25 a month,
you would get that as well as a shout out on the podcast or fan input. As a supporter for $50 a month, you would get all that in the previous two tiers, as well as a one-time gift or book that Alice and I have read or are reading that we think would add value to your life. Or for $100 a month, we consider you family. You ever heard that before? That's friends that are so good that we consider you family. So you would get everything in the previous three tiers, as well as exclusive branded merchandise from Simple Conversations. So listen, our heart's desire is to do more and to be more. And so in order for us to do that, we need help. And so we're dependent on you to help us make that happen. So thanks for tuning in and thanks for your support. See y'all.